This episode is sponsored by Postalytics. If you're doing any type of marketing for your startup today, you're probably missing out on one of the most underrated marketing channels there is to grow your business, direct mail marketing. Finding ways to stand out and get attention for your prospects has never been harder. Business people receive over 120 emails per day. The average Gmail account contains over 8,000 messages. With Postalytics, start standing out by delivering personalized messages directly into the hands of your audience to form a deeper impression than email alone. The best part is you can integrate with your CRM to track, trace, and measure the impact of every dollar you spend. So whether you're an agency or startup founder and looking to build out your next direct mail marketing campaign, visit postalytics.com for a free account and start sending direct mail today. If you'd like to sponsor the SaaS District podcast or recommend any guests that you think would be valuable to be on the show, visit horizoncapital.com/SaaS-podcast today. Thanks again, folks. Hello, everyone. This is your host, Akil Jabbar, and welcome back to another episode of SaaS District. In today's episode, we'll be talking about insider risk, the Cyberchallenge least talked about in terms of problems in today's industry, which I'm excited to learn more about. Today we have our guest, Joe Payne, joining us. Joe is the CEO of Code42 Software, a leading data security company that focuses on reducing the risk of data leakage from insider threats. Joe is a seasoned executive with more than 20 years of experience and a proven track record leading high-growth security and tech companies. He engages personally in product strategy and direction while growing and providing vision and guidance to a world-class team of security executives. Previously, Joe served as the CEO of eSecurity, the first SIEM software company, and also served as the president of iDefense prior to its acquisition by VeriSign. So welcome, Joe. Super excited to have you on SaaS District Show today.
Thanks, Akil. That was a very nice introduction. It sounds like maybe I wrote it myself.
I appreciate that. Joe, I'd love to hear a little bit about your background, past positions, past ventures, up until I think you joined as the CEO, not as the founder at Code42 in 2015, right?
That's right. So, Akil, I just to go way back, I started out actually as a marketer. And I mention that because not many marketers end up as CEOs. More should. It's a very strategic position in the company, I think. You have to know a lot about customers and products and things like that. But I started out as a marketer in my career and then got my first crack at a CEO role in sort of 2001 timeframe and been running companies ever since. I've run about 5 different software companies. My last company, Eloqua, was a SaaS marketing automation company. We were the innovator in that space. And we ended up going public and eventually being acquired by Oracle. That was quite an interesting time. So I've been running SaaS companies now for 13 years. And as you mentioned in the upfront, before that, I was running a number of security companies.
So you were, you joined all these companies CEO, different, companies were acquired, moved on to the next one, also hired a CEO. Was there any, at that point in your life where you thought, maybe I should go and be a founder of a new company, or do you just like coming in and being able to manage, at a later stage?
That is a really, really good question. And I think one of the things that I would tell your audience is figure out who you are and what you're good at and what interests you and what you get excited about, and try to find those opportunities in life. And so what I learned is that I really enjoy sort of the growth stage of a company. Call it anywhere from 5 or 10 million in ARR to 100 billion in ARR. And that stage, I feel like where we have the beginnings of a product, we've got the beginnings of a market, but now we've got to really accelerate the business. That's really where I fit. Between my last 2 companies where I did come in as CEO, I actually looked at founding a company with a friend of mine, Harry Weller at NEA. And we started working on it and we did some work. And about 3 months into it, I went back to Harry and said, this is not for me. This is too hard with no other employees. I need to leverage some of my skills and leadership talent in a way that I can't do it myself. So to all those of you who are out there who've started from zero, I have mad respect for you because it's so hard to do that. I just feel like I'm better at helping. Once you get it to a certain level, to helping you grow it to something big. And so that's what I focus on.
Nice. And I agree with that. I mean, that's exactly what, Horizon Capital, where we focus, right? That $1 to $5 million ARR range. So, we'll probably call you once we get to that range, and then we'll have a conversation to hit you on board. Where are you guys in terms of size today? MRR, team size, user growth, and have you guys raised, additional capital, VC capital, or have you guys been bootstrapped?
Yeah, no, we have raised money. We've actually raised 137 million, and we're about 120 million in revenue, and we've got about 500 employees. Of that 137 million, about 80 of it went into the business. So that means our founders took off some money off the table over time. Our company was founded 20 years ago, so we've been around a long time. What's exciting for us right now is we've got a SaaS product called Insider, which focuses on insider risk. Very creative name there, but it is spelled weird. So, that you should give us some credit for that. But Insider really focuses on this insider risk problem. And that product has gone from 1 million at the end of 2018 to, we're over at 35 or 6 million or so in ARR today in terms of our growth, of where we are in ARR. So the growth of that product has been just incredible, and it's more than doubling of the last few years every year. So really excited about that space. And that's really where the focus of the company is today.
Nice. So you kind of were an entrepreneur within the system of building a product within it. So, I mean, you guys do it, but you had a lot more resources, but you made it work.
You nailed it. I mean, we really did have to start from scratch with that product. And we were fortunate that we had customers and we had a baseline and we had cash, so we didn't have to raise a lot more money. I mean, we haven't raised money since 2015. That's the last time we raised money, and we've been sort of operating with the capital we have since then. So that's been really a blessing for us. That's the benefit of having a core business that we've relied on to build this new business.
Nice. So tell us, what is insider risk? What is endpoint data protection? And why are 50,000 companies, businesses, enterprises needing a management solution like Code42?
Yeah, it's interesting. The world has really changed, and SaaS and cloud has been really the driver of that. And what we see is that organizations today are sharing and collaborating in ways they never did before, which is fantastic. It's made us all super productive. So we all use tools like Teams or Slack, OneDrive, G Drive, Box. Any of these collaboration tools were built to help teams really work together and collaborate together. The problem is those same tools also make it really, really easy to get your hands on important data in the company and then maybe take that data with you if you leave the organization. So, the old way of solving this problem in security was to lock everything down. Security's perspective, 5 years ago was like, look, nobody can use their USB port. We're not going to share data. If you try to share data, we're going to block that from happening. And that makes no sense in a world where the CIO is saying, no, collaborate. And the CEO is saying, share, and work together. And then the CISO, the Chief Information Security Officer, is saying, no, we don't want any of that sharing to happen. That's bad. And so there's this kind of thing. So that's where Code42 came from. We kind of said, wait a second, we think we can help solve this problem. We've been working in data security for years, and endpoint data security with a product called CrashPlan. And we looked at the problem and said, we can allow all that sharing to happen and all that collaboration to happen and just wrap a layer of security around it so that people can continue to do their jobs and we won't get in their way, but also we can tell if they share data to an untrusted site. So what does that look like in the real world? So the number one indicator of risk that you might actually take data as an insider is that you quit. We have data that shows that 60% of people tell us that they took data from their last job to help them in their current job. 60%. And that's people that admit to it. We actually think that that's even low. So it's a very, very pervasive problem. And a lot of people might think like, well, what's the big deal if they took data? That's probably just like, source code or something, our company's crown jewels, but it's not. It's literally every job. It's HR people taking payroll data, which is, really important and privileged data. It is marketing people taking strategic and product plans. It is salespeople who leave and take their entire pipeline and their sales contacts. And again, you might say, well, shouldn't they be able to take that? It's like, well, if they're going to work for a competitor, which often people are, they've been paid to build those pipelines. They shouldn't do that. It is also engineers taking source code. Hey, I wrote that routine. I should be able to keep that, anomaly engine that I built. But, part of our job is to help our clients educate their employees. They're like, hey, if you're paid to build something, you can't actually take it with you. So people tell us that they're taking stuff with them. What happens is it's really easy. I mean, right now, if you want to leave your company and take stuff, the most likely way you're going to do that is you just open up a browser on your laptop while you're sitting at Starbucks. You upload that to your Gmail and you mail it to yourself, and now you have that in your Gmail forever, right? No big deal. And similarly, people do the same thing with their Dropbox account. They might load something up in a Dropbox using a web browser. What Code42 did is we came in and said, okay, we're going to build tech that watches for that and looks for you loading to your Gmail account or your Dropbox account or loading data to any form of untrusted site. And that's been a game changer for our customers, which they had no visibility to this in the past. And now we're providing them visibility. What we don't do is we don't stop that from happening in real time, because what that does is that slows everybody down, because a lot of times employees are just doing their job in real time and they're not really trying to do anything bad or wrong. But by watching all the activity, the system can then score an alert on things that look really unusual or scary, or we organize all the departing employees so that you can at least check each one of those to make sure that, they're not taking a bunch of data. I find it really interesting and ironic that all companies collect your badge when you leave because they don't want you to access the facility. They collect your laptop again because ostensibly they don't want you to get on their network. But they never check whether you took all the company data with you when you left. And we're trying to create that as a compliance item for everybody. Like, hey, anytime someone leaves the company, get their badge, get their laptop, but also check to make sure they didn't download all of our corporate secrets and put them into their Dropbox account. And so that's really what Code42 does. And I think that explains a little bit about why it's necessary today.
Yeah, I mean, generally they'll just wait till the last day as well to cancel their email, right? So you'll have no access, but they've probably done it, days before when they knew they were quitting, right?
You're 100% right about that, Akil. People aren't stupid, right? So what they do is they get all the information that they think they need, and then they quit. And so if the security posture team is like, oh, once we hear someone quits, let's watch them more carefully, it's too late at that point. So one of the things that Code42 does is we watch 90 days at all time. Think of us as a giant DVR. We're always watching 90 days of everyone's activity and all file movement. We take what we call a zero trust approach, which is really around, we watch all users and all file activity. And if users do something anomalous in that time frame, then we'll alert on it. But again, we don't get in their way. We don't slow them down. We're not spyware that's looking at what websites they go to unless they upload documents to those websites, and then in that case, we'd say, hey, wait a second, why are you uploading these documents? So, but it's an important thing to think about when you're building your business for your entrepreneurs out there is, you do need to have the conversation with your teams about who owns the intellectual property, and if they leave, what they can take with them and what they can't take with them. I think most organizations would say, of course, you can take your contacts with you and your calendar and all that kind of stuff that you take with you, but you really can't take our marketing plans and our sales lists and our source code and things like that. And you'd be surprised, especially with a lot of younger workers today, they really don't hadn't really thought about that. They just kind of think, oh, I can take everything. I mean, I wrote it. I left the copy. Shouldn't I be able to take it with me? And the answer is no, because your boss paid you to write that. And so if they paid you to write that, they own it.
That's right. Yeah, I mean, you have that generally in most agreements, right? You have a non-compete clause or a non-compete, or they can't reuse any of the content or the email list, etc. But yeah, I mean, at that point, if you don't have something like this, it's too late. Once you find out, we've seen that before as well, like people leaving and they take, see them contacting old clients and whatnot. But at that point, you're being more kind of trying to put out the fire rather than being preventative and going to court and trying to do all that stuff. So I think this would be really nice to have something like this to avoid that situation.
Yeah, we've seen, it's really interesting. When we first put it in our own company, every single person who left, every single one took data that they shouldn't take in our own company, right? And then, but today, nobody does. What's the difference? They now know we're watching the store, because before, and at most companies today, no one's watching the store. Like if the store is wide open and all the windows and doors are open and everybody else is doing it, then people take a lot of data. But in general, people are good. And so like if you just show that you have some controls in place and that you don't expect them to do it, people just stop immediately. In fact, today at our company, almost every employee will email security saying, hey, I'm leaving, but I want you to know I'm taking these 3 files because they have my personal information on them or something, like they'll tell them in advance. And it's really, really interesting change and dynamic. And that's all about us being very transparent with the organization about what our software does and what our security team expects. And like I said, most people are good. Most people aren't that malicious hacker out there.
So, I mean, on one side, I understand, right? Like you want to have some sort of control, but on the employee side, do you ever feel like they feel as being an invasive or kind of controlling over them, and that they're feeling that's being invasive of their space?
Some people ask that. No, that's a good question. I'm glad you brought it up, because some people ask that. Hey, wait a second, are you watching it? To be clear, we're only watching for data that employees move to untrusted sites. And so that's really it. So if employees are sharing data with our ad agency, or they're sharing data with our keyword search agency, or they're whatever they're doing, none of that gets flagged, or there's no issues there. But if employees are sharing company data with themselves or with third parties or with somebody they shouldn't, they should be okay with the company saying, hey, why are you doing that? Why, and questioning that and challenging that. And a lot of times, by the way, it's by accident. We had an interesting story happen a few weeks ago. We hired a new employee away from another security company. She joined us as a salesperson, and she'd been with us about 10 days. And all of a sudden, she downloaded all of this new confidential material from her old company onto her laptop. And our software caught that and alerted on it. And our security team met with her and said, hey, what's going on here? And she said, oh my God, I have no idea how that got there. And they said, well, let me ask you a question. Did you just sign into iCloud? And she's like, yeah, when I plugged my phone into my computer, it made me put my iCloud account in. And what had happened is iCloud automatically copied all of her documents when she was at her old company to iCloud, and then copied them down to her new laptop when she signed into iCloud on her new laptop. And she didn't even know that was happening. And that's one thing that Apple does that's really not a good practice. It turns iCloud on automatically with any new machine. And so that's one of those examples where, we had her delete all that material. We notified the other company so they knew what had happened. They were embarrassed because they weren't using Code42, and they didn't see the data leave. They should have seen the data when she first copied it from their company, but they didn't have the tech in place. So that's interesting, because that's also a new sales prospect for us, because they realize, oh my gosh, we need to be able to see these kind of things. So a lot of times it can be accidental. But we assume positive intent. We assume the employee's not doing this on purpose, but then we verify to make sure. So, there's no camera. We don't have camera software that's looking at what the employee's doing. We're not looking at their keystrokes. We're not measuring their work productivity or anything like that. We're just watching, hey, this is really important company information, and are they removing it to someplace it shouldn't go? And if so, if the security team doesn't pay attention to that, they're really not doing their job.
Mm. And what are some other like general, say main threats you're seeing to the end user? And maybe say specifically for B2B SaaS solutions. Are you seeing anything on like, hackers, a lot more hacking going involved, nation states? You mentioned insider threats, or maybe you can share some other common threats you usually encounter.
Yeah, well, so there's the security industry is always evolving, and the bad folks are almost always one step ahead because there's such incentive to be bad. Right now, we're seeing a huge amount of ransomware out there. So what I would say to all you entrepreneurs out there, you should have a backup strategy and a ransomware strategy, meaning you don't want to be in a position of paying ransom. Because if you're stuck having to pay ransom, not only are you losing out on all that money, you're also 2/3 of people that pay the ransom get hacked again within the first year by the same group. Because it turns out thieves aren't necessarily, there's no honor among thieves is an old expression, and there is no honor among thieves. They'll tell you that they've, rid your system of their software, but they haven't. They've left back doors. So ransomware is a big deal right now. You need to have backups of all your, all your cloud information, but also stuff on your endpoints as well. I think the most important thing, if I'm talking to SaaS entrepreneurs and CEOs, is you've got to build security in from the beginning today. You need a whole sec DevOps approach where security is part of DevOps. It's not separated. Security is not something we do after the fact. It's not something, hey, we got to build our product first and then we'll worry about how to secure it. You've lost if you do that. Security's got to be baked in. I am a 500-person company and I have more than 20 people in security. And so like that is a different, when I was running my last company, I think we had 3 or 4 people in security with a 500-person company. It's changed. You need to have a real focus on security, and security needs to be part of product development. And it needs to be something you think about from the get-go. Getting the most hacks also that we see today are misconfigured cloud servers, or just seeing an incredible amount of misconfiguration, which results in data spillage and data leakage, and it's all avoidable. So if you have the right people on the team who understand security and how to secure your application, that will pay dividends in spades. Because it just takes one, especially as a young company. If you have one breach, you're done. I mean, if you're trying to win in the enterprise space, you can't afford one breach in your early days.
You lose it all, yeah. I mean, so you mentioned, the level of sophistication is growing, evolving in the cybersecurity space. You have 20 people on your team, kind of working on that. What else are you kind of doing to kind of, stay ahead of that, right? I mean, you have things, even blockchain technology, all these things where people are, trying to be more confidential. They're trying to hide. They're trying to be, smarter than your engineers. There's always, a smart engineer out there. So how are you guys staying on top of that?
I mean, I think it's just a constant investment in security, and we have sent people to school, we've trained people, we've put in new methodologies, but we also leverage some really good cloud technology. We use both Azure and AWS as part of our product, and we leverage the capabilities that they have because they're some of the best in the world at security also. And never thought I would say that about Microsoft, but they are. And so, learning how to leverage, don't roll your own. I mean, so many founders, want to roll their own infrastructure. They want to roll their own applications, to run their business, and blah, blah, blah. Don't do that. Invest in best of breed technologies to help you grow your business, and certainly invest in, if you're going to build something cloud native, I wouldn't do it on Jim's cloud, Jim's discount cloud service. If I were you, I would really leverage AWS or Azure or IBM, and any of the public clouds have strong security. Makes sense.
So obviously, we're talking to SaaS here. Data is, probably the most valuable asset, and all things considered. Is there a right time for when a startup to start looking for this solution? Is it after first client, 10 clients, 100 clients, or one team member, 5 team members? You said you have 500, so I can imagine a lot more to manage. Is there a right time to look at it and invest
Well,
in
you
it?
should appreciate that your first client expects you to protect their data. So I think I think it's from day one that you need to be worried about data security and what could happen to your data and who has access to your data, and are you building controls in both internally and externally? Are you building controls in for your customers so that only certain people on role-based access control is critical for your customers so that only certain people in their organization can access the data through your product. And so all those best practices in software engineering are critically important, and they're expected today. And I think all of your clients, even when you're in your first 10 clients, you can't say to them, well, you're only one of my first 10, so I didn't really have time to protect your data. That's not acceptable. You're not going to get to your next 10 if that's the approach you take. So I think you have to think about it from the get-go. And if you're listening to this right now and you're like, we haven't really given data security much thought, like you need to stop and give it some real thought.
Love it. In terms of kind of the last year, right? You probably see, a lot more teams having to move remotely. I imagine the number of incidents, the amount of, threats have kind of gone up. What other technologies involved in your solution, and how has it had to specifically adapt to the situation? Like, are you using machine learning now, firewalls, mail gateways, encryption, other things you had to adapt to?
What's really interesting is that when everybody went remote, in our industry anyway, and everybody went remote, there was a terrible strain on all the VPNs, because most security organizations are like, oh, it's okay, they can just VPN in. It's like, well, we can't VPN in. It slows us down like crazy because everyone's on the VPN, and we're trying to use Salesforce through the VPN, and all of our product and access all of our GitHub repositories, et cetera, to the VPN just didn't work. And so most companies really limited the use of their VPN, and they basically opened up their networks. And what's happened is you've got all of these employees now basically riding Comcast or Verizon or whatever, and they have complete autonomy with all of their data and your data. And so, hey, really easy to download Salesforce and bring it into into my environment, the data into my environment, really easy to access my Workday from my thing and bring it into my environment. So we saw this huge uptick in the insider problem, because all of a sudden everybody's at home and they have access to all their data at home. They're off the network. All those network-based tools that people had to keep an eye on some of that data were completely ineffective. And so from our standpoint, from the insider risk standpoint, it just absolutely skyrocketed, because insider risk is also tied very tightly with shadow IT. People start using Dropbox. They're like, oh, I use Dropbox for my kid's soccer team, and it's so easy to share data. And so, I'm going to use it to share data with Akil. So he's my colleague. We work together. I never really figured out how to use OneDrive, so I just share it if I put the data in Dropbox, I now have it forever, because that's my Dropbox account. That's not the company's Dropbox account, right? So We see a lot of that happening. We see a lot of Gmail being used. People using their own email system when they're at home. Oh, I mixed it up, or oh, it's just easier to use Gmail and then dial into the VPN or whatever. And so we saw a lot of shadow IT, and shadow IT is a huge creator of insider risk. So for us, we've had a lot of interest over the last year that's really spiked as people have, as they got through, let's lock down, figure out our VPNs and make sure our pipes are open. But now oh my goodness, how do we pay attention to what's happening with all of our data? Because we can't see it anymore. It's all out on these laptops we don't even know where they are. Are they in Hawaii? Are they in Montana? Are they sitting down the street? Because people went everywhere, as you know.
Yeah. Another common question, I think, in terms of security is, like, specifically for our audience, is they're using things like, open source code or libraries or maybe they're more vulnerable. I think we've seen in the news, like, other security breaches with big corporations where they point as open source code being their weakness, like the IP model breach in British Airways, I believe. Is this a real concern that you see? And do you have any suggestions for how to deal with the code when building their solutions that way?
Yeah, that's probably a whole podcast for a deep engineering leader to go through. But just a couple of things to think about that I've had from my own experience, which is it's really smart to have source code libraries that are standards for your organization. So I've been at multiple organizations where when we did a source code audit, it blew away. Everybody was stunned at how many different libraries we were using. And so we had way more open source software than frankly we needed to. And so it's not that so open source is fantastic. Strongly recommend using open source software. And when you can, there's no reason to reinvent the wheel. But limiting your surface area, meaning use specific libraries that are published internally that you all know we're using this library. So when a vulnerability comes out, do we have that product or not? And it's not like, well, we don't know. So that's a big thing I've run into at multiple companies of mine. So I would recommend doing some standards. It's very normal for a technical founder to say, look, my developers can use anything they want. Let them use anything they want. I don't want to get in their way of being creative. And if they like this library, they should use it. If they like that library, they should use it. That's a bad practice, just so you know. Give them some frameworks, give them some direction. And that way it's much easier for you to keep up with where you need to, update vulnerabilities when they do come out, when they do get identified, as opposed to just having it catch as catch can't. So that'd be one piece of advice I'd give this audience.
I think that's super helpful. So, Joe, you've been growing this beast for a while. You came in, well over the 5 million ARR mark, growing quite a bit. In terms of marketing, growth strategies, what channels and strategies have you say has worked best for your audience or your ICP so far, especially with the marketing background?
Yeah, I like the way you asked that question, Akil, because my answer is not the right answer for everybody. It really depends on who your buyer is and how your buyer likes to buy. So at Eloqua, my last SaaS company, we sold to marketers, and we really sold directly to the line of business. And I would tell you that the best way to get to those people is a direct sales force. And so we had a direct sales force, and we broke it up by size of business. We sold to the mid-market, we sold to enterprise market. We had, sales engineering resources report to them. So huge believer in direct sales with SaaS companies. At Code42, we go to market today for new customers 100% through the channel. And the reason we do that is because the security industry in software probably has the strongest channel orientation. And so our buyers really look to the channel to say, what product should we buy? Who do you recommend? I have buying agreements with, security resellers. And so I'm really used to buying through the channel. And that has a historical basis. And we're not going to change that. So if we want to sell to that market, we need to sell to them the way they're used to buying. And in security, they still don't. I would say for most SaaS spaces, the customer really prefers to have a direct relationship with the software company. So you should expect to do direct selling in those scenarios. And then obviously the question is, well, how do I get in front of my buyers, and how do I get? I mean, that's what we did at Eloqua. That's all we did. So that's a whole different set of podcasts on how to get to people. But I do think the customer, when you're selling to a line of business, you're selling to sales, you're selling to marketing, you're selling to finance or HR, or even development, they expect you to talk directly to them.
So channel partnerships being a big kind of source of your fuel of growth. Did you try kind of that direct sale, when you moved over to Code42, you say, okay, this worked over here, it should work over here as well? Or did you learn that the hard way? If not, what else hasn't worked and why?
Well, we always had channel as part of what we were doing at Code42, and we also have a direct sales force. What we did is we transitioned to 100% channel focus so that no deal doesn't go through the channel. So before we were sort of a hybrid model, we do some through the channel, some through direct. And yeah, that was really a decision, a learning process, because I think, as a SaaS person first, my last company was SaaS line of business. I understood that direct model is really preferred by the customer. And so I expected it to be more preferred, but it turns out both IT and security typically like to buy directly from a channel partner. Now, When the deal gets big enough, sometimes the customer says, I want to talk to the company directly. And so we'll work with them and we'll work with the channel partner, and we'll always sell it through the channel partner. So we're 100% channel. But a lot of times the buyer will want to talk to us and spend time with us and maybe even do the MSA directly with us. So, you know, at the end of the day, the person in charge is the buyer. They get to decide how they want to buy, and because they're the buyer. And so we don't dictate to them how they buy when we figure it out on the back end.
Mm. Joe, I know this might not be the best question for you, but I'll ask anyway. If you were, no, it could still work because you won't have to build it. But if you were starting a new solution today in the cybersecurity industry, what are some opportunities or solutions that you would tackle and you see right now some big opportunities in?
Listen, I think the most important thing when you're starting any business is to understand the market and understand, you know, a piece of it. Most businesses fail, right? Most businesses fail. That's just the math of what we do. Very few succeed. But the ones that succeed are people that have insight into the market based on their past experiences and are bringing an improvement to the market. And so I don't recommend, and I see this a lot today, you know, everybody in college wants to be a founder of a business. Everybody wants to be an entrepreneur. It's exciting. I want to be an entrepreneur. So I'm just going to go build something I know nothing about. And I don't recommend that. I would say go work someplace, learn about a market, and then see if you see an opportunity where you can make a change in that market by inventing something new, a market that you know and you understand, then go do that. That's how you win. So as an example, like Code42, you know, we didn't just randomly say, oh, insider risk, that's the thing that we just want to do that. That seems interesting and it's growing and let's jump into it. We basically looked at where we were really good and what we really understood. And what we really understood was data movement and data security and how to move data around on endpoints and what it looked like when it moved around. And so we tried some things there, and it was a natural growth and evolution based on what we did. And so I think that's what I would recommend. You know, don't just try to say like, hey, ransomware is hot right now. Let me go build a ransomware solution. Like, well, if you don't know anything about ransomware and you've never been in the space, that is really hard to do. And I'm not saying you can't do it. You can, but you're much more likely to be successful if you know a market and then you come up with a better way to handle the market than the next person.
Yeah, that's a good advice. So you're obviously being the CEO of a leading company, 500 plus employees in the space. I imagine that's quite demanding. What kind of skills would you say you had to develop over these last few years to kind of step up to the challenge? Because yes, a lot of people want to coming out of university want to be the CEO, they want to be the founder, but they need the skills, right? I mean, it was different also being a founder versus leading 500 employees. And then how do you measure your kind of leadership success around that?
You know, I think the most important job for any CEO or any leader is being a good communicator. Because you need to lead a group of people, and you want everybody going in the same direction. So learning how to be a communicator, whatever type of communication, whatever style that is for you, but being a really good communicator to get everybody sort of on the same page. And then I think you got to be really good at hiring. I mean, that's the job of a leader, is like, I need to hire a great team of people so that we can get leverage. You know, one person. History shows us that one person can drive companies. There are some companies that have been driven by one person, but for the most part, you really need good people to execute your plan. And so, being somebody that's really, really good at hiring others, I think is a skill that I've evaluated. And I think also being able to give clear and concise direction, setting the direction for the organization. You're not going to be the most popular. We call it, don't manage for affinity. Don't manage so everybody likes you. Manage for results. Which means sometimes you have to have hard conversations with people who aren't performing. Sometimes you have to have hard conversations with people who are performing, but they're not performing well enough. And again, if you're going to drive to win a market, you're going to have some of those things. In terms of how you measure success, let me tell you, in my opinion, how not to measure success. It's based on your valuation of your company. I think one of the things that venture folks have done real well, and Akil, I hope this doesn't hit a little close to home, is they're very good at convincing founders that they should raise money, then creating an environment where they've built a company so big that they have to keep raising money, and that once the idea has traction, they keep putting money in, which has the result of them owning more and more of the business. And what that does is it limits the ability of the organization, of the founders and the early employees to monetize that great idea and investment. And then a lot of the returns end up in the hands of the investors. And so I would say to founders, like, yeah, you know, using other people's capital is good, but don't judge your success on whether you got a great valuation in the last round of financing, because every time you do a financing, you are potentially diluting yourself and the early employees and investors. So you know, my goals when I'm trying to win in my market is I want to win my market, because most of the returns in any investment or in any market go to the winner. Whoever wins the market, whoever gets there first. If you're the second or third player, you get a lot less percent of the economics in the market. And so if you care about winning the economics in the market, you want to be the winner. So try to win. And that means working hard and doing lots of the things that we've discussed and will discuss. But also along the way, don't lose sight of the fact that keep an eye on your cap table, because you want the people that came up with the ideas to get some of the value. And that's something I'm really proud of in my last company, is that we didn't raise a lot of money at Eloqua. And when we sold to Oracle for about $1 billion, a lot of that money went to the employees and to the founders and to the people that had been there a long time. And you know, we had a competitor in the space, Marketo, that sold for more money later on, but they had raised so much money that the people that made the money were the investors, not the people that had built the product. And so, you know, it's not always about the valuation. It's about the valuation that comes to you and the people that build the product. That's the entrepreneur and the worker speak. Now, I know, Akil, you might feel differently as a venture guy, but it's important to note for the founders that they should look out for themselves and their employees too.
100%. I guess we're less, venture. We're more kind of the acquisition. But no, I still agree with you 100%. But there's also the thinking, right? Like, do you own 1% of 100 million, or do you own 100% of 1 million? I guess it's just, there's also that personal choice, right?
You have to get that. Well, you have to get that balance right too. So I've raised 137 million at this company. So I believe in raising money. But again, there's players that have raised money 3 times this year in our space. And I'm like, why are you doing that? Like, because you're just diluting all the people. And if there's an outcome down the road, it's possible all those people are ahead of all the people that have built the product. And so I'm a sucker for really changing the lives of the people that work for us, and changing the lives of the people that build the product is as important as returning money to banks and investors and things like that. So, at Eloqua, we had 30 people who made over $1 million on our deal, and over 200 that made over $100,000. Everybody made, and a lot of those were in the $700,000-$800,000 ranges. And so this is life-changing money. That's real money for people that are in their 20s and 30s. And so it was a really great outcome for our entire company.
And that's kind of the whole beauty, right, of why you want to build a company, to kind of have that life-changing event. Yeah. Do you have any kind of best productivity hacks, strategies, or tips for maybe new founders in the space, or even you as a CEO use to kind of manage all the stuff that you have on your plate?
I think the hard part, and this may surprise you, I think the biggest productivity hack I have is to tell you to exercise. I know that sounds probably a little bit weird, especially if you're but I find that exercise is the best way to keep yourself healthy, and being healthy keeps your mind healthy. And also that time to yourself is often a time when you might have inspiration or ideas or realizations, etc. So that's my biggest hack is to try to carve that time out. And that's really hard in our business. We're always traveling in a non-COVID situation. And there's always somebody who wants to meet, and there's always, there's little time. So carving that time out is really important. And then the other thing is, if you can, walk without a podcast. Now I know we're doing a podcast here, so I'm talking against you, but I think in the last few years, most of us, when we take our walks, we put our headphones in and then we go listen to the daily, or we go listen to what our favorite podcast is. And we're losing out on thinking time. And so I think, however you carve your thinking time out, you should. I find that when you're in front of a computer, you might say you're thinking, but you're really not. And so walking and thinking is really good. And avoid the temptation to put your headphones in every once in a while. Avoid the temptation to make that call. Because again, if you're a type A CEO, you're always like, I got to be productive. I can't just walk around the block. I got to be making a phone call to somebody. I got to be doing this. And I'm as guilty as that as anyone. But you need that time to think. The thinking part of this job is really, really important.
Or pulling out your phone, right? Checking your email. I think any of that just sucks you away from just
all
being
of that
your own
gets in the
thoughts.
way. Put all that in the same bucket. It's you need to literally do nothing at times, because then your brain has time to process different things, and it has time to force you to address tough issues. You, as a CEO, you should always be asking yourself, sort of, who's the least performing person on my team? And it's a really uncomfortable question to be asking yourself, but there's always, there's a ladder, and there's always someone on the bottom rung, and they may be pretty high up. They may be doing really well, and that's fantastic, but you need to always know who's your lowest performing person on your team, because it's your job to either push them up so that they're not, or to make a change there. And I think that's one of the differences between somebody like me who comes in and a founder. I find often when I come into founder-led teams, there's a lot of people there that aren't doing great because the founder didn't feel comfortable pushing them out, and they were here a long time. And, but the founder knows. They'll sit with me and they're like, I know that person's really not performing, or they're getting in the way. And so, but they don't make the tough decision. And sometimes that's really the difference between, being an effective CEO and being an ineffective one, is you have to make those tough decisions.
And that's kind of the conversation we have with a lot of our founders, right? They usually they come to us like, we're thinking to sell our company, we want to take over. And, we can see clearly, like, they know what they need to do, but they just don't want to make those hard decisions, or they hit the plateau of kind of what they're the founder, they built a great product, but they just don't know how to lead or make those decisions. We're like, look, we need to improve our sales. We trust that we have this person around for 5 years. He's been good, but they can't make that call of, they need the right person for the right, role at this stage of the company, right? And what needs to change.
Right.
Yeah. Joel, I want to switch gears here, kind of moving to more kind of personal, a little bit more rapid fire.
Okay.
What's one piece of advice you wish you had known and would tell your 25-year-old self?
80% of the CEO job is people. When I was 25 and when I got my first CEO job, I was like 32. And I was like, I thought it was all about strategy or marketing or sales. If I just focused on that, then it would be all good. And Jack Welch wrote a book at the time and said, that 75% of the job is people. And I thought he was the biggest moron I'd ever met. I literally remember thinking that. I was like, what a moron. He doesn't know anything about being a CEO. Of course, Jack Welch was a famous CEO and at the time considered the CEO guru. And he was right. I just wish I'd known that earlier. So if you're not spending 70 to 80% of your time on people issues, you're probably not doing it the right way.
Yeah. What are some of the biggest challenges you're currently facing in order to continue to grow Code42? Meaning, what's keeping you up at night these days?
It's probably going to sound familiar to all of your entrepreneurs out there. How do I get to more of my buyers? My buyer is the CISO, and it's the hardest person in the world to get to, in my opinion. They don't listen to their phones. They don't answer the phones. They don't read their emails. They won't connect with you on LinkedIn. It's like, how do I get to these CISOs and show them what we have and convince them that they ought to buy it? So I'm living the same dream that even at 100+ million in revenue, you have the same probably core issue that all of your people have at 1 million in revenue. That's what keeps me up at night.
Joe, I think you need to go back to the olden days and go knock on their doors. I think that's the only way, but with your mask, of course, right?
Wouldn't it be great if we could actually do that? I don't know where any of them are. I mean, they don't, you know what I mean? Like they're not at their office. That's true. They don't even want us to come anymore. That's the one thing the pandemic has done is I think it showed buyers like, hey, we don't even have to entertain you at our company. It used to be that when a vendor CEO, for example, would come into town, they'd be like, okay, well, show him respect and at least meet him in the conference room and, just off the lobby. Today, they're like, we don't want to see you. Like, they don't want us to come. And, with the pandemic, I don't want to see them either. But I think a lot of stuff's going to be done via Zoom. What I've spent the pandemic doing is doing one-on-one demos with CISOs. So a lot of times the benefit of my title is that I can email someone out of the blue and be like, if they'll read it, I can be like, hey, I'm doing a one-on-one demo. I just need no salespeople, no PowerPoints. I just want to show you the product and get your feedback. And it's a new space. And the thing about security people is they never want to miss anything new. Because if you're in security, you can't miss anything new. If you miss it, you could be in big trouble, right? So they're open to having those meetings. And I've been just doing our product demo one-on-one. I've probably done 50 or 60 of them with CISOs and CIOs and a few CEOs, just showing them the product. And that's been great for me because it gets me deep into the product. I also have to get better and better and better at the product, but also I'm talking directly to the customer. I get good feedback. I learn what they care about. And it's a way to introduce them to what we're doing with it's less intimidating. One of my mentors said to me, people always tell the truth in one-on-ones. So you should always try to have all your meetings be one-on-ones. Any meeting you can have one-on-one. Because as soon as you introduce a third or fourth or fifth person into the mix, now everybody's positioning. They can't say what they really mean in front of other people. They can't say, if their subordinate is in the room, they know they have to look tough. They can't look like they're telling too much to the vendor, and so I try to do one-on-ones. And I anytime you can get a one-on-one with a customer or prospect, you should take it. And even to the extent that I kick salespeople out of the room. I'll be like, hey, you got to leave. I want to talk to this person. And I'll say, how's my sales team doing? Are they doing okay? Do you feel like you can trust them? Are they giving you the information you need? And that helps to build a bond too, that sometimes 9 times out of 10, they'll say they're doing great. They're doing a fantastic job. Sometimes they'll say they're rude, or they're not, they don't listen or whatever. And it's like, well, okay, well, that's why I'm here. How can I help? And, you weren't going to win that deal anyway if you didn't have that conversation. So getting those feelings out and getting those issues out builds trust and builds relationships. So, strong advice to all of you out there, try to do one-on-ones. And that goes for everything. I mean, it goes for your meetings with your subordinates and your team. It goes for your relationships with your children. I have 4 kids and I used to take them all everywhere together until I had that epiphany one day where that mentor of mine said, this even matters with your kids. They tell the truth in one-on-ones. Don't take 4 of your kids to get ice cream. Take 1 and watch what happens. And I was like, wow. And that was so true. So we still do a lot together as a group, but sometimes getting them separate one-on-one changes the entire dynamics of the conversation and therefore the relationship. So that was some of the best advice I've ever got.
That's super simple. That's fantastic advice though. Love it. Joe, who or what are the best resources? Can be books, people like mentors you, or even people you follow who you can share and have been, the most instrumental to your success over these last few years?
Well, I'm a reader, and so there's 2 books that I really think everybody ought to read, and I try to make all our employees read. Good to Great by Jim Collins, which is old, but it's still so relevant and so right on. And Jim himself is really good. There's a lot of resources around that book. And then Chip and Dan Heath have written a bunch of books that are very relevant to the SaaS industry and to what we do. But the one I like the best is called Switch. And Switch is all about change. How do you create change? And for someone like me that's trying to change markets, they're trying to change how a buyer thinks about things, they're trying to change an organization. I really love that book. So strongly recommend the Heath brothers, any of their books, but I like Switch, and I also like Made to Stick, which helps. How do you learn to tell stories about your product or your company that people will remember? And I think that's a super important skill from a marketing standpoint to have. I'm actually more active on Snapchat than I am on Twitter. So I'm not a big follower of people looking for pithy advice there. But I do read some business books. The other thing I would say is I think reading novels, fiction is also super helpful for your mind. So I'm reading, just finished a series called the Murderbot series, which is if you're at all a techie, it's based way in the future, sci-fi thing about a bot basically that controls itself. It's pretty really, really, really well written. And he's an introvert, or she's an introvert, because that's also part of it. It's an androgynous character. Who knows? Is it she or he? It's never clear. It's a they. In any case, I like that series, and I think your audience would like that series too. And then if you're an introvert and you want to read about another classic introvert, I recently read A Man Called Ove, and I strongly recommend that as well. So these are things that I trying to keep ourselves somewhat well-rounded, I think is an important part of the job, so that you can relate to what's happening in the world and what your employees are dealing with.
Nice. All fantastic books. We'll add those links to our show notes for people to check out. I also love Jim Collins and the other one as well. Made to stick. Last question, Joe. What does success mean to you today? You've had a couple of nice exits, leading a high growth company, but there's also no right answer. This could be personally, this could be financially, this could be life, could be business. There's no right answer.
There's nothing more satisfying in life, no matter what you do, than winning with a team. Winning with a team trumps all things. I have these great pictures of Megan Rapinoe getting awarded the Golden Boot trophy from the last Women's World Cup. And she's happy and just a smile on her face. And then the next picture is her with her team being awarded the championship trophy for winning the World Cup. And the difference in expressions is palpable. She's ecstatic. She's crying. She's with her teammates. There's no better feeling. She wouldn't trade that for anything. Winning the individual honor is nice, but it doesn't bring you that same level of emotion. So for me, it's all about winning with the team. And the team that I have at Code42, we're working really hard together to try to win this market. And how do we define winning? We'll know. Are we the market leader in insider risk, 2 years from now? And are we acknowledged as such by everybody? And do all the big companies use us? And we're on that path, and we can see that victory lane. And so we're working really hard to get there together. And, the other thing I learned in having done this before is we also set up a Code42 Foundation. And this time, at Eloqua, we didn't do that. And I regret that because Eloqua's gone now. Oracle bought it, and it's kind of folded into Oracle, and we're all spread to the 7 winds. But this time, I want to make sure that no matter what happens with Code42, if we go public or if we get bought someday or something happens, that there's this foundation that sits in Minneapolis that's set up around the idea of equity and inclusion that outlives us. And, our founders put a big chunk of stock in there. It's about 1% of our stock. And so it's a meaningful amount of money in the foundation. We've been raising money for the foundation. All the employees are involved. The employees run the foundation. It's not run by the executives. It's run by the employees, and they're the board of directors and all kinds of stuff. And so our idea here is that we can make the world a better place. And if we win our market and we do really well as a business, we will also feed that foundation with lots of cash and stock and money. And then that will then turn around and serve the community in ways that could last 100 years. And so that's something that we're really, in terms of how will you know if you've won? If you've really made all of that happen and brought all that together.
It's interesting how you see that also in sports, but then I don't know, that probably goes back a little, while ago of, our tribe, going out and hunting together and coming back and bringing the gold for the whole community. So I think it's kind of the same mentality, like that's a day of success that actually me and my team went out there and we won together. So that's cool. I love it.
Yeah, I think it's definitely not sports. It goes back a long way, but just even today, as you think about the best moments you've had at work, they're usually around something you did with your team. And so, we do everything we can to emphasize working together as a team. All of our bonuses are team based, and, we want to win. We want to win or lose together as a team. And that's going to be the way that's exciting, satisfying, and meaningful.
Nice. This has been a fantastic episode, Joe. I really appreciate you joining SaaS District Show today. Where can the founders listening in, our audience, get in touch with you, learn more about you or Code42?
Well, you can definitely connect with me on LinkedIn. You can follow me on Twitter. As I said, I'm more active on Snapchat than I am on Twitter. I think, I've also, as I've gotten older, I guard my time a little bit better than I used to. So if you're listening and you're like, hey, I'd love to just spend half an hour with you, Joe, you got to understand that might get multiplied by 40 people. And all of a sudden it's a pretty significant time commitment. So apologies in advance. I'm mentoring a bunch of small startups. I'm an investor in a bunch of small startups right now. And so I kind of limit my time to those that I'm already, tied to, at least for now, while I'm fully employed at Code42, which thank God the board has decided that I can stay here. And someday I might be on the beach again. And if I am, I'll have more time to work with others. But be patient with me, connect with me on LinkedIn, and happy to respond to any inquiries or questions or ideas. But thanks for your time today.
Oh, thank you so much, Joe. Much appreciated.
Cheers.
Thank you all for watching this episode and joining SaaS District today. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell for future episodes where we interview top leaders in the SaaS industry. If you're a SaaS company looking to grow and unlock the true value of your business, get in touch with us at Horizon Capital, and myself or one of our consultants will provide a free assessment to help you get there and hit your goals. If you have any feedback or suggestions for this podcast, please comment down below and help us improve our content for you all. Thanks again, and see you on the next one.